So in this week's lesson, we're going to talk about attitudes and job satisfaction. Attitudes are the way that we experience things, the way that we think about and feel about people or work or whatever. But it's not just how we think, it's how we feel, like kind of on a visceral level. Like it's not something that's necessarily even conscious. Maya Angelou said, people won't remember what you have to say, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And that's important when you're understanding or trying to understand attitudes. So when we're talking about attitudes, we want to understand cognitive dissonance, because human beings try to be consistent. And when they have two different attitudes that clash, they really have a different approach to this. They step back and well, which is right? I mean, if the boss did something nice, but he's really a jerk most of the time, well, wait a minute. And you try to make sense of what's going on. Or if the boss is really the opposite and he does something really mean, he's always good, but he does something mean, maybe you write it off. You try to rationally understand what's going on. So now when we're talking about attitudes and behavior, we want to look at moderating variables. Moderating variables mean the strength of variables, like what causes it to be stronger. So the importance of the attitude or its correspondence to behavior, its accessibility, the presence of social pressures of other people, that could be part of it, or whether or not a person has, and this is the most important, direct personal experience. If you've experienced the boss's wrath, well, you have a different feel for it than somebody else who understands it theoretically, right? Or if you've experienced the boss going way out of his way to be generous and kind to you, that may reshape your attitude. Now, we're going to talk about job satisfaction, involvement, psychological empowerment, and a couple other concepts that are all kind of tied together. Job satisfaction is a positive feeling about the job resulting from evaluation of its characteristics. That's a textbook way of saying, hey, I like what I do and I enjoy it. Right? So that's the first part. Job involvement is the degree of psychological identification with a particular job. Hi, what do you do? The first question that you ask somebody is, what's your name? And then the second question is, what do you do? I'm Darren, I'm a professor. So if the first thing that rolls off my tongue is I'm a professor, or if that's the way that I think about who I am, that's psychological identification. Now, that's different than organizational commitment, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Psychological empowerment is the degree of influence that you have over your own job. This is really important. I want to pause here because very often well-meaning managers try to fix something that doesn't seem to work from where they are. And in the process, they hand down rules and regulations to their underlings. And notice the language I'm using, their underlings, not their associates or the people that they work with, the people that work for them. They hand this down. This is the way we're going to do this thing. And it's a mess. And your underlings, your employees, your associates could have told you about it, but you didn't allow it. And so you're degrading the psychological empowerment that they have over their work. And that is going to be a problem. We'll see why in just a moment. Organizational commitment is identifying with a particular organization. So going back to this last thing, hi, I'm Darren. You are? And you tell me your name. And I say, well, what do you do? I'm a professor at Charleston Southern University. Now, if I'm really keen on the at Charleston Southern University part, then that's organizational commitment. That's the identifying with the particular organization. Okay? If it's just I'm a professor and please don't ask me where, that's a whole different thing. That's not organizational commitment. But if you like the organization and you identify with it and you're attuned to its goals, then there's likely organizational commitment. Perceived organizational support is going to be the major driver of whether you have organizational commitment. It's the degree to which employees believe the organization cares about them. Are you in my corner or aren't you? Okay. The perceived organizational commitment is higher when rewards are fair, employees are involved in the decision making, supervisors are supportive, not directive. When they're just handing down edicts, that's different than when they're saying, hey, look, we have to do this thing. Do you have an idea of how you can do this or make this better, or what can we do to improve this, and work with them in order to let them write their own ticket of how they're going to meet those objectives. You have to meet the objectives, but you can choose how they're going to do it. George Patton said, never tell a man how to do a thing, tell him what to do, and they'll surprise you with their ingenuity. Employee engagement. The degree of overall job satisfaction is employee engagement. And if you see people that are thriving at work, they love what they do, they can't wait to do more of it, that's one thing, they're engaged. If you see people that are living for the weekend, something went wrong somewhere, and it's probably in POS. Engaged employees are passionate about their work, and the opposite is also true. If they're not engaged, they won't be passionate about it. Robin's had a few interesting things in here, like the responses to the satisfaction scale, and I want to talk about that one. Sometimes we think that employees who are complaining about things are just squeaky wheels, and sometimes they are. That's true. Sometimes there are just whiny personalities. Other times they're exercising voice because they care, and to the degree that they care, they're going to exercise voice. So here on the left side you have active and passive, and on the top you have constructive and destructive. So if there's a problem and you take an active approach, and it's a constructive active approach, you're going to exercise voice. You're going to say, management, there's this problem. Please help us, please. Here's what the problem is. If management listens, you'll get more of that, and that's a good thing because they'll sound out and help you find the problems that you need to address. If management does not listen, it's going to work out differently. Over time, the employees will learn to either just say, well, okay, I'm going to be constructive and active, I'll be loyal, and I'll do my job, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm not really going to continue to go the extra mile. It's not the same thing. Or if they're passive and destructive, they're going to go to full out neglect. And full out neglect, they're living for the weekends. I don't care. I have my job, but I'm not really going to be productive. Don't bother me. I will dot the I's and cross the T's and make sure you have your job done, but I'm not really going to do anything to improve things. If it gets so intolerable that they just can't stand it anymore, they go to active and destructive, and that's exit. Now, exit, if you have a lot of turnover, then the POS is not there, the positive support from management is not there, and people are trying to get out. That is a sign that they're not satisfied and that you are managing poorly, and you need to change something. If people have been there long term, we talked about this in the previous lesson, if people have been there for a long time and they are energized and they love what they do, you're doing something very right, and you should keep doing more of that. So responses to dissatisfaction are fairly understandable. Happy workers are more likely to be productive, and they're more likely to be happy if you don't micromanage. The thing that my MBAs hate the most are, and I've heard this for more than a decade now, are micromanaging employers who reach down and tell them what to do. No, if we need to do something, involve us in the process, help us figure out what could be done, but don't just send out an edict because something has changed. I understand that the circumstances have changed, but let us be part of the process. Give us the autonomy over our own jobs. Then the people who are more satisfied with their jobs are also more likely to engage in OCBs, and we talked about that in the previous lesson as well. Okay, that is volunteering for things and wanting to do more. And then satisfied employees are also likely to increase customer satisfaction and loyalty. So you actually get a bump to the bottom line the more satisfied employees are, and multiple studies have shown that this is true. Job satisfaction and turnover work the same way. Low job satisfaction is a predictor of neglect or workplace violence or exit. Okay, so to the degree that you have low job satisfaction, you're going to have all these maladies associated with it. Many managers are also less than concerned, or they overestimate how satisfied their employees are. Managers can't, the higher you go in an organization, the more blind you become to the reality on the ground. So you need to keep a close line, a number of people within the organization who are connected to what's really going on, so that you can see through their eyes, because you really won't be able to the higher you go. And so many managers either don't care, and that's the hard way of looking at it, or they just simply overestimated how satisfied employees are. But your goal, what you need to do as a manager is pay attention to job satisfaction levels and measure it regularly to understand where they are. Now, if you measure it, you have to have anonymous measuring of job satisfaction. And you can also kind of understand this just by walking around and getting a pulse of what's going on. Because people who are engaged, when they don't know that you're looking and they're engaged, they're going to still be engaged. People who are not engaged are going to be looking a little bit more carefully for your presence because they don't want to be caught, but they're not going to be engaged. So if you have a lot of people who are not engaged, something's wrong. If you have a lot of people who are engaged, you're doing the right thing. And that's how you look at the difference between attitudes and job satisfaction and how these work together. Hey, thanks for your time. I try to keep these lecturettes short, and I'll continue to do that. Thank you. Please read the textbook, and we'll talk later. Thanks. Bye-bye.